From the City of Angels off the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie, and this is Coast to Coast AM. It's Alien Night tonight on Coast to Coast, so get ready for that. Let me start with this. I received an email from one of our listeners named Josh. I want to share it with you. So, George, my brother, 40-year-old Carl Rick Strange, was a huge fan of Coast to Coast. I'm also a big fan and have been listening since the 90s. He had recently moved to Roswell, New Mexico to pursue his passion of exploring and investigating the paranormal, the unexplained. He spent most days at the UFO Museum at Roswell or skywatching at night while listening to the show. He died on August 6th of this year under circumstances which have not yet been determined. I was wondering if there's any way that you can give him a shout-out on the show. This would be a very huge thing for my family. It would bring a smile to more than just a few tearful eyes. Thank you for your time and for the best radio show I've ever heard. If by some miracle that you can do this, just let me know, and I emailed him earlier tonight. So a shout-out to you, Carl Rick Strange, up there in the heavens. Within decades, solar storms are likely to become more disruptive to planes and spacecraft, say researchers. The work predicts that once the sun shifts toward an era of lower solar activity, more hazardous radiation will reach Earth, and we'll report on all these things as they occur. If the recent wild leaps and plunges in the financial markets have prompted you to cash out your stocks, you're not alone. Individual investors are bolting for the exits. Thursday's big sell-off again, which saw the Dow Jones Industrial Average move by triple digits for the 9th straight month, the latest evidence of a crisis mentality that has taken on with global financial markets during a very unusually quiet month of August into a nail-biter for small investors. And a lot of them have one word for their broker: sell. Morgan Stanley says that the United States and Eurozone dangerously close to a recession, criticizing policymakers and predicting that the European Central Bank will have to reverse its rates policy. Who watches the store for us? None other than Catherine Austin Fitz. Catherine, first of all, the stock market down again. It's just like a roller coaster. How come?
George, it's down 5% for the year. Gold's up 31%.
Wow.
So it's a very big difference. Well, you know, what we've been watching is a market kept going with government spending and governments printing money. And what the sovereign debt negotiations are saying and feeding back is, you know, we're not going to continue to do that. Now, the Fed has said we're going to keep interest rates low, but that's not enough. And if you look at what, you know, so the revisions, for example, Morgan Stanley's revisions of global growth, you know, 3.9% sounds like a lot of growth until you look at how much government spending and how much government printing is going on, and then you're seeing real economy growth rates that are negative. So there's an adjustment that has to happen, and it's, you look at the charts in the stock market, it's not over yet.
What would you do right now if you had money in the stock market? Would you get out?
Well, it depends on what I was in, but I would not. You know, I'm an investment advisor, and we don't have a big equities position. In fact, we're sitting in cash and fixed income and precious metals and waiting for our opportunity. We think if you just look at what's going on, we think it could get worse this fall. So we're on the sidelines, but waiting, or not completely on the sidelines, but mostly on the sidelines, waiting to see what happens, because you have too much. You know, warfare is not good for equity markets, George. And covertly and invisibly, you've got too much war and not enough law, and that's a major overhang on the market, because, you know, many investors are watching this and saying, look, this is a market that's not under adult supervision. We have the Department of Justice, you know, now saying that it's investigating Standard & Poor's. You know, the result of a downgrade by Standard & Poor's.
And now they're going to get investigated.
Right, and then we have, you know, and then we also have, you know, just other fighting going on, which is, you know, you kind of sit back and say, look, these guys are going at each other with razor blades. And then in Europe, we have France and Germany saying, oh, what we need is more centralization. Well, centralization is what's destroyed or really harmed the European economy. So now they're saying we're going to centralize more. I don't think so. That's not going to work.
All right, Catherine, thanks so much. listen to this story. Whether you believe in man-made global warming or not, it may not rank as the most compelling reason to curb so-called greenhouse gases, but reducing our emissions might save humanity from a preemptive alien attack, according to scientists now. Watching from afar, extraterrestrial beings might view changes in Earth's atmosphere as symptomatic of a civilization growing out of control and take drastic action to keep us from becoming a more serious threat, according to these researchers. This highly speculative scenario is one of several described by scientists at NASA and Pennsylvania State University. While considered unlikely, they say that it could play out where humans and alien life make contact at some point in the future. I wonder what they know that they're not telling us. The head of NASA's Planetary Science Division and colleagues compiled a list of possible outcomes that could unfold in the aftermath of a close encounter. And they say it could be beneficial to humanity, neutral, or harmful. Their report is called Would Contact with Extraterrestrials Benefit or Harm Humanity? A Scenario Analysis. My daughter's a travel agent, and she sent me this story today when she heard about it. All flights at an international airport in southwestern China were halted for at least an hour after an unidentified flying object was seen hovering near the airport's runway. Now, this has happened before. Flight restrictions lifted after the UFO left. Authorities have not offered any explanation of the incident. Some people speculate it was a sky lantern used by Chinese to pray for good luck or some kind of a balloon. Peter Davenport from the National UFO Reporting Center. Here we go again, the old lantern story.
Exactly. Phenomenon I've been reporting on this program for now, I think, George, about 14 months or so, and it's approaching some kind of crescendo. I don't know what to make of the Chinese report. It's very difficult for me or anybody else, for that matter, to be able to pass judgment in any kind of reasonable way in the absence of hard fact. But I would not be in the least surprised if the Chinese are experiencing UFO sightings. I've never seen such a deluge of reports in the 17 years I've been doing this crazy job as what I've seen over the last 2 months. So I think anything is possible, George.
My daughter was excited with this one, Peter. She sent me this email this morning. She said, Dad, you got to read this one. And, of course, we've had a couple stories like this where these UFOs are pretty darn bold, Peter, where they just hover right over the runways.
This is quite reminiscent of the O'Hare sighting of November of 2006, which I've reported on many, many times. In fact, I have some very dramatic tape recording of one of the witnesses who was standing there looking at the object at O'Hare Airport. Although we're getting so many reports out of China, I'm finding it difficult to keep them all straight, George, and I don't know what is fact and what's repeated fact and so on and so forth. So, again, I go back to the point, in the absence of hard data, I'm very hard put to pass any kind of judgment on what's going on there.
Peter's website, which he finances himself, ufocenter.com. Go to it. Thanks, Peter. With the Kepler Satellite Observatory detecting new planets at an incredible rate and the powerful computers at NASA's Ames Research Center seeking signs of distant life, will a breakthrough discovery happen shortly or not? Or have there already been secret encounters with alien beings? Tonight on Coast to Coast, our special 4-hour report on aliens. Up next, Brad Steiger, his latest work with his wife, Sherry, Real Aliens, Space Beings and Creatures from Other Worlds. For decades, award-winning writer Brad Steiger has been devoted to exploring and examining very unusual, hidden, secret, and other strange occurrences. Brad grew up in a home where ghostly phenomena was a common occurrence. He and his wife just completed another one of their many books. This one, Real Aliens, Space Beings and Creatures from Other Worlds. I'm glad to introduce Brad Steiger back to Coast. Hey, Brad, how are you?
I'm fine, George. Great to be back with you.
You too. This was very complete, comprehensive, and I got to tell you, riveting. Every story, from the first one to the last one, I couldn't put it down.
Thank you so much for saying that. That is exactly what we sought to do. And the reviews have been so rewarding. They've come from people who have been in the field as long as I have, and people who have just always wondered about this mystery. And they've all said, that this is complete. And what we tried to do is to take each chapter as a mini history of that particular type of report of alien beings. So we start with the modern era, which, you and I both know that this phenomena is as old as humankind.
That's right.
But we start with the modern era, which we kind of have a loose consensus, 1947, and then build up to the very present, which would be last summer when we had to go to press.
Well, I'm telling you, we've all over the years have read or have heard of various UFO stories.
Right.
But this is the first time I've seen all of these cases that we're so familiar with, or cases that we didn't even know about, compiled in one book where they're all there. And I found that to be fascinating. I even got a kick out of the section of Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon during Apollo 11, where you had him and described his appearance on the Larry King show, of which I was on. I was sitting in that group, and Buzz just went on and on and on about the spacecraft and this and that. And, Larry is biting his fingers going, tell me, did you see a UFO or not? And he'd say, and then we saw this thing and this piece of spacecraft fly by, and everybody was looking at each other while Buzz went on. And you picked that up perfectly.
Well, if you look up anticlimactic in the dictionary, you're going to get Buzz Aldrin's story. I mean, that was classic. It was classic. It was like a little comedy routine or something. But what we have there are so many reports, and people change their minds, but they do make reports. Sometimes they say, well, I didn't really mean it was a UFO or it was an alien and so forth. We're not making any judgments in this book. We are simply recounting so that there's if I may say so, it's like an encyclopedia of alienology in our lifetime and projecting it. We do have the chapters, as you know, and I know you're very much into this particular aspect of ancient times and our prehistory and religion. We do have chapters dealing with that, but we take, from the quote-unquote little green man and explain where that nomenclature came from, and then the blonde Nordics, the grays, and so forth. And we just try to present what is going on in a way that would be exciting and informative to the person reading the book. Not that we want any particular pre-digested decision to come from anyone. We want people to have an access to this, to understand. Because, again, when you get to be in your mid-70s and you've been in this field since, I was 11 years old.
Yeah,
when
long time.
That's
right.
Yeah. And been working that long, you do tend to have a perspective that maybe someone just coming new to the field might not have. And then adding that to Sherry's research and her experiences and her studies. And thank you for all the nice things you're saying about it. I really appreciate it.
Well, you and Sherry deserve it. Tell me about the story of Epsilon Butes. This is an incredible story that a lot of people might not be aware of what very well could be an alien object that is circling our moon.
I'm so intrigued by that, and you picked up on it when it first came out. I could not imagine why people weren't going wild about this. But here is a broadcast, so to speak, and sometimes we theorize that maybe there's I don't know what kind of device it'd be, but some type of tape recorder in the heavens that keeps broadcasting messages. But here, and serious-minded astronomers said, this is coming from a source. It's coming from something that, is circling. It is in an orbit, and it is broadcasting meaningful messages. Now, and then it just disappeared from the stories, and I tried to track it down and get more information, and then I don't like to project thoughts like this, and sometimes we get a little weary of saying, it must be a cover-up. But I could not understand that this could really be anything other than some kind of cover-up with this information, and there must have been more that would be released and that we reported in the book. That alien contact, it seems as though someone was telling us, we're here and we're available, so to speak, for communication, and then there was nothing else.
And this object apparently was parked around our moon about, 13,000 years ago?
Yeah, this is what the communication claimed, that it had been parked there, like it was kind of an overseer, like that was its mission, to say when we were ready enough to receive this information.
Well, it would still be there in orbit, right?
Yes. That's what I understand, but I haven't been able to get any more information about it. There was a lot at first, and I tried to track it down at the time, and then it just dried up, and I couldn't get anyone else to answer. But, I'm stubborn. And, Sherry says, yes, I agree with you. We've got to put this in the book.
Yeah,
Maybe
it's a great story.
People get excited about it. Some additional statements from someone who should know will be forced to make these statements and explain what happened.
Well, and if it's still broadcasting something, we should have SETI point its ears that way somewhere.
Yes, indeed. And I can't believe that it isn't pointed there. But I can't get any more information. Maybe someone with higher ranking than Sherry or myself can. And I'm hoping that people will see this, someone with that kind of influence, and demand that we say, what has happened to Epsilon Bootis?
When you put this book together with Sherry, you must have concluded that there are a lot of UFO reports out there, and they're good ones. Something's happening on this planet.
Oh,
you have to conclude that.
Okay, first of all, I know no disagreement from you. It's a great mystery.
It is.
Some people feel they have the answer, and they're very aloof about that, and they're very supercilious, saying we have the answer. As long as we have been in this research field, we realize that it's a multi-level phenomenon. It's a multi-level, multi-dimensional phenomena. We know something is going on. We don't know if it's extraterrestrial, if it's multi-dimensional. We don't know, though I kind of suspect there might be bases under the sea. There might be bases under Earth to account for some of the ancient legends. But the phenomena has been with us forever. And we feel that it influences every aspect of our existence in ways that we haven't even begun to dream of yet. We feel that strongly about it, that whatever the phenomena is, and we're not saying they come from Alpha Centauri, we're not saying they come from the hollow earth, we're simply saying consider all of this as a great mystery, a multi-layered mystery, but something is going on.
There's no doubt. I mean, some of the quotes, for example, of the many people and the many stories that you had in the book, Edgar Mitchell, we're way past the time for bringing this information to the public. It's time for serious discussions. Paul Hellyer, Canadian Defense Minister, retired. UFOs are as real as airplanes that fly over your head. The Felix Zeigel, a professor out there in Moscow, he says the important thing now is for us to discard any preconceived notions about UFOs and to organize a global scale that is calm, sensation-free, and done on strictly scientific basis of study. And then, of course, I think the late Monsignor Balducci from the Vatican,
right.
He said, there are already numerous considerations which makes the existence of these extraterrestrial beings into a certainty we cannot doubt. That's a Monsignor from the Vatican that you quote.
That's right. And we are in constant email communication with scientists in Russia, in Poland, in the UK, in Spain, in Italy. People are working on this seriously.
Brad, we're going to come back in a moment. We're going to talk more about your work, real aliens, space beings, and creatures from other worlds, and we'll take some phone calls as well with Brad Steiger on Coast to Coast AM. Well, next hour, Kim Carlsberg joins us as we talk about alien abductees. Throughout the evening, we'll also be talking to several abductees and experts, including later in the program, Travis Walton, of course, and you know that incredible story, Fire in the Sky. Up next, we'll take some calls, and we'll continue chatting with Brad Steiger, real aliens, space beings, and creatures from other worlds. Brad, why do you think at such a young age, you, me, and so many other people became fascinated with stories of UFOs and extraterrestrial life? What happened to us?
Well, I think as the eminent philosopher Lady Gaga says, we were just born that way.
Maybe so. Maybe so.
I have to bring up one thing. I got excited about Upsilon Booties, which is a favorite of mine. Some people like to play the name game with research, and I think we cannot overlook that the British astronomer who made the discovery of this robot satellite was named Duncan Lunan.
How about that?
So again, moon, it's beside the moon. So those little things kind of add spice to research.
You know, we continue to get these UFO reports and stories all over the place. Yet there are some people who truly believe government's going to disclose. I don't think so, and I've told them that. What do you think?
I don't either. I've said that, I think as long as I've been researching, in writing, I should say, which goes back to the 50s and the first book in the 66 about UFOs, I've said then, it's not going to. And people say, well, they can't keep a secret. Oh, yeah, they can. I mean, but we have, and talking about this not long ago with Kevin Randall, whom I know you're aware of his fine research, and continually finding people making deathbed, I hate to use the word confession, testimony.
Sure.
Deathbed testimony.
They just want to get it off their chest.
Yeah. And you know, I can't see why someone has kept it secret all of their lives and then on their deathbed would want to leave that as part of their legacy. So it seems we're building up to a time of disclosure, but I really am not optimistic about this coming anytime soon. I know our friends in the exopolitical side of it, they're very enthusiastic, and we hear from them regularly and respect all of their research and what they're trying to do. And, you know, they're optimists, and I try to be a cockeyed optimist as much as possible. So I'm hopeful that we will have some sort of great revelation, but I'm just not terribly optimistic that it'll happen in our lifetime anyway.
Yeah, unless it's a mistake.
A mistake.
A mistake or something like that happens.
Good one, George.
Let's go to the phones. David in Pleasant Hills, California, west of the Rockies. David, go ahead. You're on with Brad Steiger.
Hey, George. Hey, Brad. How you doing tonight?
Oh, okay, George.
Good.
What was your name?
David.
I'm David.
David. Okay, David.
Yeah, how's it going? Yeah, I had a couple people that I've been kind of researching lately. I've seen a few YouTube videos. It's all over the internet with stuff like what John Lear has talked about. One of the big ones is Stephen Greer and that congressional. I think it was a congressional hearing that he was trying to get going as far as disclosure goes. Things like one thing I wanted to say though is I don't think we'll ever see disclosure because, as far as I know, the Bilderberg group is being controlled by the Greys. And as far as that's going on, as far as all that secrecy and these destructive agendas are going on, we're not going to see anything come out in the open.
Let's hypothesize about this, Brad. You know, this group, the Illuminati, the Bilderbergs, these people, You think they're being controlled by ETs? I would say not. I think they just don't want us to know because they're afraid they will lose control of us.
Yes. No, I don't. One stays open, as I certainly have to do, and you certainly have to do, George.
Yeah.
Stay open to all. And, I'm open to that type of comment, but I think the Bilderbergers, Illuminati, and all of that particular, which we're working on a second edition of our conspiracy book now, and I heard you do a little blurb with Jesse at the beginning there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to write about conspiracies. We're just being overwhelmed trying to keep up with that. But again, the caller agrees that there's probably not going to be disclosure as far as groups being controlled by ETs or aliens or multidimensionals, whatever. That I think the whole field has and can have a certain paranoid aspect to it. And I think we have to beware of that. I've seen so many friends since I began really kind of lose it, who were serious researchers, got in a little too deeply, felt that they really had insight into the truth, and then sad to say, many of them suffered mental issues and
that happens.
I won't go on, but it's a field, and I told Sherry before we really got into this strong again, it's like entering a magic theater in one sense. And I said, things are going to happen, because when I was really into it in the 60s and the 70s, things that just beggared normal, sensible descriptions happen. And when we really got into it, those strange, unexplainable, mysterious things happen. And you get information from many sources, and then things are, you just have to watch a very cautious line. There's something about entering this field that you have to stay balanced. You really have to know yourself. And that's why we maintain that. A time of meditation, a time of prayer, a time of reading from the Holy Scriptures of all faiths. I think you have to have that kind of balance. And it's a field we are convinced, and I'll say it again, it's the great mystery that affects all of us.
Oh, it sure is.
In so many ways.
What fascinates me, too, Brad, these stories of submersible UFOs.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
They pop out of the ocean. They're witnessed by sailors and people on boats, ships. Truly incredible stuff.
Marvelous stuff. And get those stories we receive all the time, from shrimp fishermen and other fishermen and military men, Navy men, and so forth who write us with their reports.
Can you imagine being on a boat and you see a UFO smash itself out of the water and just take off?
Well, we stood on a shore of a lake in Peru and saw that happen at least a dozen times in one night.
Yeah.
No explanation what we were really seeing, but we all knew what it looked like we were seeing.
Anything going back in or just going out?
No, they go out too. They would come in and out, dive, then go out, and almost like they were putting on a
show for us. Let's go to Clearwater, Florida. Scott, east of the Rockies. Hi, Scott. Go ahead.
Hey, good evening. They were putting a show on for you, Brad. They knew that you'd be watching, so they put on a little play.
Okay. All right.
You can't figure out what these things are, but I figured it out when I first heard about, the UFOs. Actually, they're supernatural. I don't know why you don't want to actually say they're supernatural. You say they're multidimensional, but you can't really, you kind of stay away from saying they're actually supernatural.
I don't think you've read many of my books, have you?
I haven't. I've never read any of your books, Brad.
Well, then you would know that I began speaking of the supernatural aspect back in the 60s, much to the dismay of my fellow researchers.
And, I still think a lot of people will say they're dimensional, they're demonic. Mm-hmm. I still think they're coming from planetary systems within our galaxy.
Well, you cannot deny that as a workable theory, but as we said, it's such a multi-layered theory. And certainly the spiritual or the supernatural, people always, that's kind of a knee-jerk word for a lot of people, but I think we understand what we mean when I say that. That aspect of another dimension, another world, another supernatural, whatever you define that, because there are so many similarities between UFO phenomena, aliens, and ghosts.
Okay. Let's go next to Joe in Chicago, Illinois. Hey, Joe, go ahead.
Hi, how you doing this evening, George?
Good, Joe. All is well. Thank you.
Well, I've been thinking about something for a long time, and I just wanted to get your take on it, being you mentioned in the orbit around the moon, there's been a ship there for about 13,000 years, correct?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, now my question is, could there be a remote possibility that the human race itself was put on Earth as an experiment for an advanced civilization?
That's a very popular theory. That's a very popular theory, yes.
Could be. You know, if you believe in hybrids and if you believe we've been genetically altered, we could be the grand experiment.
We certainly could.
I wonder if it failed. What do you think, Brad?
I question that. I've been reading, there's been a lot of research in the UK now. New Scientist has had a lot of articles about who we really are as a species. And wow, there's so little of us that's really Homo sapiens, and it's very interesting. Then there's that mysterious aspect that almost seems to be a little space junk thrown in there. So who are we really? That's been one of the driving impulses in all of my research. Every book I've written is really trying to answer who we really are and what is our destiny.
Next up, let's go to Anonymous on our wildcard line. Hey, go ahead there. Of course, it's Bob, but he's in an anonymous city. Go ahead, Bob.
Oh, I was just going to say he writes a lot of poetry.
Greetings, guys. I love the show as always, George. You do a wonderful job, and we really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Talking about this. I have talked with the aliens in person. I have asked them questions, why they're here. Their answer was to manage human souls as well as to help mankind. I've seen them in a number of different cities. One specific species of them, and I don't drink, and I don't do drugs, and I was in the magic program, so I've signed all the secrecy agreements, and that's why I don't want anything to come out. And they work for NASA, and they used to commute when the shuttle program was going on. They would commute through Houston Intercontinental Airport from Houston to Orlando, and then rent cars and drive over to the Kennedy Space Center. And they communicated not only with talking, but with mental telepathy. And I don't think the government's ever going to release any of that. I think it's just everybody has to understand that it's the workers whose contracts with the government have expired who come forward and say, hey, enough is enough. Everybody needs to know the truth. There are good guys out there. There are bad guys out there in terms of races. We've dealt with a number of different races. I think Philip Corso was right on the money. I read his book. I did not work with him, though. And I'm retired now, and if you're going to be abducted, you have the right to tell them that you don't want to be abducted, and they can't abduct you. They might beat up on you a little bit, but I'm serious.
Well, I just certainly you are telling a story that is very familiar to me and to Sherry, and we listen to many people tell stories like yours, and we it's your story, and why would we doubt it? We have many chapters on contactees and those who are feel they're working with the aliens. They've always been working with the aliens. Many people feel they're hybrids and have been working with alien contact, either telepathic or physical. So at this point, we certainly have to stay open. Anything's
possible, Brad, now.
That's right.
What did you think of the Barney and Betty Hill case, which you illustrate in your book?
Well, it is, of course, the archetype, the prototype for the abduction case, though there were abductions, as you well know, before Betty and Barney, but this one really made the press. It's a very interesting case. It's an interesting case. You can look at it psychologically. You can look at it in terms of an expression of many types of frustration and attempts at getting information out to the public. If you look at the extraterrestrial or the beings, wherever they're from, trying to get a little information out. There are certain psychological aspects which I think are interesting, which allow the skeptics and the cynics a little bit of room on it. But it is the archetypal, prototypical case of the abduction phenomena, though I think we've had many cases that are far more complex and really more interesting. But certainly met Betty many occasions, and she's a woman. I always applauded her courage to come forth with this story. She was a very down-to-earth person, at least from my perspective, and I think this is a story that has the germ of a contact situation to which we must be open and must be aware is happening every day to some Betty and Barney somewhere.
David is in Cliffside Park, New Jersey, and he's on Coast to Coast. Go ahead, David.
I just got to say one thing. This show is far out.
It is far out.
Okay, well, my story starts back when my parents moved to Westtown, Pennsylvania. And I was 2 years old, and I remember yanking on my mom's dress saying, "Mommy, the little people in my room again." She said, "Oh, sweetheart, you were dreaming." And even as a kid, I knew the difference between reality and a dream, and this was real stuff. And years went by. I had another contact, 3 beings in my room, one to my right, one at the foot of my bed, one to the left of me. I felt that the one to the left was female, so I'll call her she. She put her hand on my arm, looked me in the eyes, and said, "We've seen you before, and we're going to see you again." So I didn't wake up screaming or freaking out. I just took it all in. And, I had other experiences in Westtown. It was very, very strange.
Well, you said something very interesting when you said little people. And we have to recognize, I think, if we're going to be open as researchers, that so many of these stories of contact with aliens, and as you just described, fit exactly the schemata set forth by the fairy legends, or the Shay, as they call themselves. We're warned never to call them fairies, they're Shay. But at any rate, these entities that we have countless centuries of myth, of abduction, of hybrids, of substituting their children for ours and vice versa, of people being taken away for what they think is an hour and it's 2 months, or they think is 2 months and it's an hour. So we have centuries of tradition of fairy myth and fairy folklore, which fit, they just overlay perfectly with the
many investors are watching this and saying, look, this is a market that's not under adult supervision. We have the Department of Justice, now saying that it's investigating Standard & Poor's. The result of a downgrade by Standard & Poor's is
and now they're going to get investigated.
Right. And then we have, and then we also have, just other fighting going on, which is, you kind of sit back and say, look, these guys are going at each other with razor blades. And then in Europe, we have France and Germany saying, oh, what we need is more centralization. Well, centralization is what's destroyed or really harmed the European economy. So now they're saying we're going to centralize more. I don't think so. That's not going to work.
All right, Catherine, thanks so much. Listen to this story. Whether you believe in man-made global warming or not, it may not rank as the most compelling reason to curb so-called greenhouse gases. but reducing our emissions might save humanity from a preemptive alien attack, according to scientists. My family, it would bring a smile to more than just a few tearful eyes. Thank you for your time and for the best radio show I've ever heard. If by some miracle that you can do this, just let me know, and I emailed him earlier tonight. So a shout out to you, Carl Rick Strange, up there in the heavens. Within decades, solar storms are likely to become more disruptive to planes and spacecraft, say researchers. The work predicts that once the sun shifts toward an era of lower solar activity, more hazardous radiation will reach Earth, and we'll report on all these things as they occur. If the recent wild leaps and plunges in the financial markets have prompted you to cash out your stocks, you're not alone. Individual investors are bolting for the exits. Thursday's big sell-off again, which saw the Dow Jones Industrial Average move by triple digits for the 9th straight month, the latest evidence of a crisis mentality that has taken on with global. From the City of Angels off the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie, and this is Coast to Coast AM. It's Alien Night tonight on Coast to Coast, so get ready for that. Let me start with this. I received an email from one of our listeners named Josh. I want to share it with you. So, George, my brother, 40-year-old Carl Rick Strange, was a huge fan of Coast to Coast. I'm also a big fan and have been listening since the 90s. He had recently moved to Roswell, New Mexico to pursue his passion of exploring and investigating the paranormal, the unexplained. He spent most days at the UFO Museum in Roswell or skywatching at night while listening to the show. He died on August 6th of this year under circumstances which have not yet been determined. I was wondering if there's any way that you can give him a shout-out on the show. This would be a very huge thing for my financial markets during a very unusually quiet month of August into a nail-biter for small investors. And a lot of them have one word for their broker: sell. Morgan Stanley says that the United States and Eurozone dangerously close to a recession, criticizing policymakers and predicting that the European Central Bank will have to reverse its rates policy. Who watches the store for us? None other than Catherine Austin Fitz. Catherine, first of all, the stock market down again. It's just like a roller coaster. How come?
George, it's down 5% for the year. Gold's up 31%.
Wow.
So it's a very big difference. Well, you know, what we've been watching is a market kept going with government spending and governments printing money. And what the sovereign debt negotiations are saying and feeding back is, you know, we're not going to continue to do that. Now, the Fed has said we're going to keep interest rates low, but that's not enough. And if you look at what, you know, the revisions, for example, Morgan Stanley's revisions of global growth, you know, 3.9% sounds like a lot of growth until you look at how much government spending and how much government printing is going on. And then you're seeing real economy growth rates that are negative. So there's an adjustment that has to happen. And you look at the charts in the stock market, it's not over yet.
What would you do right now if you had money in the stock market? Would you get out?
Well, it depends on what I was in, but I would not. You know, I'm an investment advisor, and we don't have a big equities position. In fact, we're sitting in cash and fixed income and precious metals and waiting for our opportunity. We think if you just look at what's going on, we think it could get worse this fall. So we're on the sidelines, but waiting, or not completely on the sidelines, but mostly on the sidelines, waiting to see what happens, because you have too much. You know, warfare is not good for equity markets, George, and covertly and invisibly, you've got too much war and not enough law, and that's a major overhang on the market, because